Before emperors wore crowns, before senators wrote laws, men with swords wrote history in blood. They didn't just win battles, they bent civilizations to their will. They were not born great. They were forged in fire, betrayal, and the screaming chaos of ancient war. And the world never forgot them. Rome was not built by marble and speeches. It was built by 10 men, and the armies that followed them into hell. Some were sons of senators, others crawled up from dirt and hunger. But every single one of them shared one terrifying gift: the ability to look at impossible odds and smile. These are the 10 most feared military commanders in Roman history, not ranked by title, not ranked by birth, ranked by the thing that actually matters: the trembling they caused in the hearts of their enemies. Rome was bleeding. Hannibal Barca had crossed the Alps with elephants, humiliated Roman army after Roman army, and was marching toward the heart of the Republic. Every general who faced him lost. So Scipio did something no one expected. He didn't wait for Hannibal to come to him. He took the war to Carthage itself, forcing Hannibal to abandon Italy, to race home and defend his own people. Scipio turned the hunter into the hunted. The decisive moment came in 202 BC at the Battle of Zama. Scipio had studied Hannibal. He knew every trick, every feint, every psychological weapon in that great general's arsenal, and his deadliest weapon, the war elephants. So Scipio built deliberate gaps in his lines. Imagine standing in those Roman ranks, the ground shaking, the thunder of enormous beasts charging straight at you, every instinct screaming, run. But you hold, because your general told you to hold. The elephants rushed through the gaps, harmlessly. Then, coordinated trumpet blasts, screaming soldiers, chaos. The animals panic. They turn. They trample their own army. Rome's infantry closes in, disciplined, merciless, unstoppable. Hannibal, the man who haunted Roman nightmares for 15 years, was defeated. That victory didn't just end a war. It saved Rome from extinction and planted the seeds of an empire that would one day rule the world. His name was Publius Cornelius Scipio, but history remembered him by the name he earned, Africanus. He came from Arpinum, far from the marble halls of senatorial privilege. He had no famous ancestors, no inherited legions, no political connections. He had something rarer: talent, and the hunger that only poverty teaches. But Marius didn't just rise, he rewrote the rules. Before him, only landowners could serve in the Roman army. The poor, the Capite Censi, literally those counted only by their heads, were invisible to Rome's military machine. Marius looked at those invisible men and saw something extraordinary: an army. He opened the legions to the landless. He gave them training, weapons, armor, and a promise: serve Rome, and Rome will give you land. In an instant, the Roman army transformed from a seasonal militia of property owners into a professional fighting force loyal to the bone. But here was the dangerous truth lurking beneath that genius. Those soldiers weren't loyal to the Senate anymore. They were loyal to the man who fed them. A precedent had been set, and history would bleed for it. On the battlefield, Marius was a force of nature. He crushed the Numidians in Africa. But his greatest moment came when 2 Germanic tribes, the Teutones and the Cimbri, were marching toward Italy, having already annihilated entire Roman legions. Marius intercepted them. Over 100,000 enemies killed under his command. He was elected consul 7 times. 7. No Roman before him, no Roman after him. And yet, the very army he created, the very soldiers whose loyalty he purchased with land and glory, that army would one day march on Rome itself, because his greatest student was watching. And his name was Sulla. He didn't look like a monster. Sulla was known for his piercing blue eyes, his almost theatrical sense of style, his reputation as a wit and a lover of the arts. Behind that dandy exterior lived something ancient and cold, a mind without mercy. He earned his first real glory serving under Marius himself, helping capture the Numidian king Jugurtha. But old alliances in Rome had the lifespan of a candle in a storm. When the Senate moved to strip Sulla of a critical military command against King Mithridates of Pontus, he did something that stopped all of Rome in its tracks. He marched his legions on the city. Citizens fled through the streets. Senators abandoned their robes and ran. For the first time in history, Rome, the city that had sent armies to every corner of the known world, watched an army march through its own gates with hostile intent. Sulla seized power as dictator. But unlike the emergency dictatorships of old, temporary, limited, constitutional, Sulla's dictatorship was something new. It was personal, absolute, and terrifying. He introduced the proscriptions, public lists of enemies, names written on boards in the forum. Any Roman citizen on that list could be killed on sight, their property seized, their bodies displayed as warnings. Thousands died. And then, in a move that shocked Rome perhaps more than anything else, Sulla voluntarily stepped down. He walked away, retired, died peacefully. But the damage was done. He hadn't just committed violence. He had proven that violence worked. That a general with loyal legions could seize Rome, reshape its laws, and walk away unpunished. Every ambitious man who came after him, Caesar, Antony, Augustus, had learned the same lesson. The Republic was a door, and Sulla had kicked it open. For decades, pirates ruled the Mediterranean. They raided coastlines, captured Roman citizens for ransom, disrupted trade routes, and throttled Rome's food supply. The greatest navy in the ancient world seemed helpless against them. Then Rome gave one man absolute authority over every shore, Gnaeus Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great. His response was surgical. 500 ships, 120,000 soldiers. The Mediterranean divided into patrol zones, every escape route sealed. A coordinated sweep that drove the pirates from one sea zone to the next, cornering them, capturing them, destroying them. In just 3 months, the Mediterranean was Roman again. Mare Nostrum, our sea. The people of Rome practically worshipped him. He then turned east, dismantling King Mithridates' empire, reorganizing entire provinces, expanding Rome's territory in one of the greatest eastern campaigns in history. But power, especially that much power, makes enemies. Pompey entered the first triumvirate alongside Julius Caesar and the wealthy Crassus, a political alliance that held the Republic together by sheer force of will, and the marriage bond between Pompey and Caesar's own daughter Julia. When Julia died, the bond died with her. When Crassus fell in the catastrophic disaster against the Parthians at Carrhae, the alliance collapsed entirely. Caesar crossed the Rubicon. Pompey aligned with the Senate. Civil war. At the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BC, Caesar crushed him. Pompey fled to Egypt, a client king, a safe harbor, a place to regroup. Instead, he found a knife. The Egyptian court, hoping to win Caesar's favor, assassinated him. His severed head was presented to Julius Caesar as a gift, and Caesar, the man who had hunted him across the known world, wept. Because with Pompey's death, something irreplaceable was lost. Not just a rival, not just a general, the last true giant of the old Republic. There are men who change history. And then there is Caesar. Alia iacta estimated. The die is cast. With those 3 words, Julius Caesar didn't just start a civil war. He ended an entire era of Roman history. But before the Rubicon, before the Senate, before Cleopatra, before the Ides of March, there was Gaul. For 8 years, Caesar waged war across a vast, forested land teeming with warrior tribes, treacherous terrain, and enemies who had never been conquered. His masterpiece came at the Siege of Alesia, 52 BC. The Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix had united dozens of tribes and retreated to the heavily fortified hilltop stronghold of Alesia, with nearly 80,000 warriors. Caesar didn't storm the walls. He surrounded the entire mountain. He built an inner wall to trap Vercingetorix inside, then an outer wall to keep the relief army of 250,000 Gauls from reaching him. Caesar's army was simultaneously besieging one enemy and being besieged by another. Outnumbered, surrounded, running low on food, and still, they held. Vercingetorix surrendered. Gaul was Roman. By the time Caesar returned to Rome, beloved by his soldiers, adored by the people, feared by the Senate, he had tripled Roman territory, reformed the calendar, centralized authority, and had his face minted on coins. But the Senate saw not a hero. They saw a king. On the Ides of March 44 BC, in a building at the foot of the Theatre of Pompey, beneath a statue of his old rival, 23 blades found him. Among them, the hand of Brutus, a man Caesar had loved almost as a son. His assassination was meant to save the Republic. Instead, it plunged Rome into the final bloody civil war that would birth an empire. They killed Caesar, but they could not kill what Caesar had started. Mark Antony was everything Rome wanted in a leader: tall, charismatic, ferocious in battle, a speaker who could move crowds to tears or fury with the same voice. Caesar's most trusted lieutenant, the man who stood over Caesar's bleeding body in the Senate and turned Rome's grief into a weapon. His reading of Caesar's will, a political masterstroke so perfectly executed it incited the Roman people to hunt down the conspirators, remains one of the most brilliant acts of political theater in ancient history. He formed the Second Triumvirate with Octavian and Lepidus, and together they crushed Caesar's killers at Philippi. Then Antony went east, and in the east he met Cleopatra. Rome told itself it was just seduction, but it was more than that. It was strategy, alliance, love, and ego all tangled together in ways that neither of them could separate. Antony settled in Alexandria, had children with Cleopatra. In a public ceremony, he recognized those children as heirs to Eastern kingdoms. To Roman eyes, it was abandonment. Octavian called it treason. The propaganda war Octavian waged was devastating. Antony had gone Eastern, had abandoned Roman values, had chosen a foreign queen over his own people. When the final confrontation came at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC, Octavian's fleet, commanded by the genius of Agrippa, dismantled everything. Surrounded, defeated, abandoned even by his own troops. Mark Antony fell on his own sword. Cleopatra followed, and in their death, the last dream of a divided Roman world died too. The Republic was gone. The Empire had arrived, and its name was Augustus. History remembers Augustus as the first emperor, but historians who look closer know the truth. Without Agrippa, there is no Augustus.
Born outside the aristocracy, Agrippa was Octavian's childhood friend, but friendship in Rome was cheap. What Agrippa offered was something far rarer: absolute competence, absolute loyalty, and zero desire for personal glory. Where Octavian was the politician, Agrippa was the general. Where the future emperor hesitated, Agrippa acted. Where Rome needed victories, Agrippa delivered his crowning military achievement, the Battle of Actium. While Antony and Cleopatra relied on passion and prestige, Agrippa relied on calculation. He cut off supply lines, isolated the enemy, starved their fleet, then personally commanded the Roman ships in battle, forcing the Egyptians into retreat through bold, clinical naval maneuvers. Octavian won the battle, but Agrippa won the war, and then he built the peace. He reorganized the army, improved Rome's water supply, drained malarial swamps, built public baths, constructed roads that connected an empire, and, perhaps most visibly to history, he built the original Pantheon, a temple to all the gods, still standing in Rome today. He married Octavian's own daughter, was named imperial heir, could have seized power at any moment. He never did. He died before Augustus, quietly, without betrayal, without ambition, overstepping loyalty. In a city built on backstabbing and blood, Agrippa was something almost mythological, a great man who chose greatness in service rather than greatness in power. Rome never saw his like again. The year was 9 AD. 3 Roman legions, 17,000 men, had been lured into the dense forests of Teutoburg. Germanic warriors under the chieftain Arminius had surrounded them on all sides. In 3 days of ambush and slaughter, Rome suffered one of the most catastrophic military defeats in its entire history. Emperor Augustus reportedly paced his palace, striking his head against the walls, crying out, "Varus, give me back my legions." The forests of Germania became Rome's nightmare. For years, no one dared go back. Then came Germanicus, nephew of Emperor Tiberius, grandson of Mark Antony, beloved by his soldiers with a fierce, almost personal loyalty that no other commander of his era inspired. He led his men back into the darkness of those forests, and in one of the most emotionally powerful moments in Roman military history, he found the bones, scattered across miles of woodland, skulls nailed to trees, Roman armor rotting in the undergrowth. Germanicus gave them proper burial. He performed the rites, built the funeral pyres, honored the dead, and then he raised his sword. At the Battle of the Weser River in 16 AD, Germanicus faced Arminius in open battle and crushed him. Through cavalry superiority and legionary discipline, he inflicted devastating losses on the Germanic forces. Rome had its revenge.
But Tiberius, jealous, paranoid, threatened by a general too beloved, recalled him. Shortly after, on a diplomatic mission in the east, Germanicus died under deeply suspicious circumstances. Many believed he was poisoned. Rome mourned as if it had lost a son, because in a way, it had. His children would inherit the purple. His son became Caligula. His great-nephew, Nero, the Golden General, was gone. But the darkness he had kept at bay slowly crept back in. Britannia, rough, cold, fiercely resistant. A land where even Julius Caesar had turned back, where tribes painted themselves blue and vanished into forests like ghosts. In 77 AD, the Emperor Domitian appointed a governor to this thankless posting. His name was Gnaeus Julius Agricola, and he was about to change everything. Over 7 relentless years, Agricola pushed Roman dominance further north than it had ever been. He didn't just fight. He built forts, roads, administrative centers. He invited local tribal elites into Roman culture, education, politics. He turned resistance into cooperation, one generation at a time, and then he marched north, into the highlands, into the land that would one day be called Scotland. At the Battle of Mons Graupius, his legions crushed the Caledonian forces in a victory that was almost too complete. Minimal Roman losses, catastrophic enemy casualties. He also launched naval expeditions that finally proved definitively what had long been suspected. Britannia was an island. Geographers across the empire updated their maps. But Domitian, insecure, envious, threatened by a general whose fame now eclipsed his own, called Agricola home. No more commands, no more campaigns. He spent the rest of his life in quiet retirement, surrounded by whispered rumors of imperial poisoning. Like so many brilliant Romans who had shone too brightly under dim emperors, he never got to finish his work. The northern frontier was never fully consolidated. Decades later, the Emperor Hadrian would build his famous wall, right along the line where Agricola had stopped. The greatest testimony to a general that history nearly forgot. A wall built to defend the ground he had conquered. In a family of legends, Drusus was perhaps the purest, younger brother of Tiberius, favorite son of Livia, stepson of Augustus himself. But he never coasted on that golden lineage. Between 12 and 9 BC, Drusus led the most daring Roman campaigns into the heart of Germania that the empire had ever attempted. He crossed the Rhine. He pushed through forests and rivers no Roman general had ever penetrated. He conquered tribe after tribe. The Tencteri, the Usipetes, the Sugambri, extending Rome's reach to the banks of the Elbe River. Farther east than Rome had ever gone. But it wasn't just his victories that earned him something rare in Roman military culture. It was who he was to his men. He marched with them, ate with them, slept in the same mud,
shared every danger without the distance that rank usually demanded. His soldiers didn't just respect him, they loved him. In 9 BC, after another successful campaign, Drusus fell from his horse during a retreat. His injuries were fatal. He died weeks later. 29 years old. Rome grieved in a way it rarely did for anyone but emperors. Augustus, the most powerful man in the world, wept openly. His brother Tiberius rode for days through the night to reach him before the end. He was given a state funeral fit for a god. Monuments were raised. His name was honored in song and ceremony. And most tellingly, his title, Germanicus, was passed to his son. The same title that would define a generation of Roman commanders, a warrior dead at 29, remembered for centuries. Because Rome knew, even in its grief, what it had lost. Not just a general, a glimpse of what Rome could have been. The history of Rome is often told through the voices of emperors, through the speeches of senators, through the marble faces of men who sat on thrones. But it was these men, these 10, who actually built the empire, who marched into unknown lands, who made decisions in seconds that echoed for centuries, who bled and loved and betrayed and died, so that the empire could live one more generation. Some of them died in glory, others in shadows, poisoned by the very rulers they served. Many were erased by jealousy, by politics, by the cruel arithmetic of ambition. But none of them were forgotten, because the ground they walked on is still there. The roads they built still run beneath European cities. The tactics they invented are still studied in military academies today. And the names, Scipio, Marius, Sulla, Pompey, Caesar, Antony, Agrippa, Germanicus, Agricola, Drusus, those names still carry weight, still carry meaning, still carry the particular electricity of lives so fully, so dangerously, so completely lived. They were not gods. They were not perfect. They were men, brilliant, ambitious, flawed, and mortal, who picked up the sword when history demanded it, and through that sword shaped the world you and I were born into. Before the tanks, before the missiles, before the satellites and the nuclear codes, there were 10 men, and they were enough. If these forgotten titans of history moved you, if their stories made you feel the weight of something ancient and real, then leave a like, drop a comment with your favorite general, and subscribe so you never miss another chapter of history told the way it deserves to be told. And as always, may the eagles of Rome fly eternal. May history never be forgotten.